Welcome to Order Militarist Radio TV, and today's topic is what is real Christian activism? And it's very important because we see a lot of so-called activists on social media, TV, music, movies, and oh, we gotta protect these sort of animals. We gotta protect these little animals. We gotta protect these little animals. But they don't protect the innocent Christians. So, is that real activism? Or what we're going to talk about, real activism? And we welcome Brother Alexis to the show.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on Order Militaris Radio TV. I'm always glad to be on this new news initiative, breaking grounds in the English-speaking Catholic world, where most media is controlled or is led by people who don't really have the primary intention of telling you the truth. They have the primary intention of raising money. We don't speak the truth to offend, but we know the truth will offend many in the age we live, and this is an important topic. So I want to clarify at the beginning for people listening that we are not using the term activist or activism in the Marxist sense. We're using it in the general sense of anyone who is supporting a cause in the public forum in loyalty to an ideal. Okay.
So, let's see. When we think of Christian activism, we can look at the Franks who didn't really waste time and gathered together and defeated the Turks in the Battle of Tours. The Crusaders, Sobieski, the Cristeros, taking up arms to defeat the Marxists in Mexico. What is Christian activism?
Okay, so today's show is a follow-up on our previous show, What is Christian Leadership? And I encourage you to watch that show because this follows closely. So obviously, activism can mean all kinds of things. You mentioned the ones who, defend animals, defend whales, save the bay, save the forest. And nearly all the times you hear the word activist or activism today, it's a Marxist organization. It is some kind of fake group that's funded by globalists or Bilderbergers to push a narrative and create news so that they can publish it and maintain the kind of control they want. But here we're going to use activists in a generic sense of anyone who is loyal to a particular ideal acting in society. And Christian activism in that case would be, it is the habit of a faithful Catholic who is Catholic in all aspects of his life, but particularly in the public forum, where he has the courage and integrity, the firmness of mind and the character to act as a Catholic without shame as a Catholic. So as we mentioned in our show on Christian leadership, we're talking about a very rare thing today. I think some modern examples of Christian activism would be pro-lifers. They're nearly all Christians, and actually they're nearly all Catholics. And a great example, they spend hours and hours and years of their life standing in front of clinics to dissuade women by the thousands not to kill their children. Mm-hmm. A wonderful example, very noble group of folks, and probably one of the few cases where we can point to some group that's actually faithful in every aspect of their behavior. We're not talking about the who write articles, who lobby Washington or raise money. I'm talking about the people there in front of them from the days of college when they nearly run over my apostolates on the street of Boston years ago. So excellent group. And that's an example of what Christian activism is, but it isn't confined only to the pro-life movement. And Catholics have been activists throughout their whole life. They're not supporting an ideal or agenda. They're living out their faith and fidelity to Jesus Christ. Truth, to uphold justice, and to Catholics is also a group of Catholic activists. We don't just talk about things, we actually want to get them done.
One of the main questions you said we should look at is from one of my little videos I put together with just free music and Microsoft PowerPoint. And it's, what does it mean faith requires action and action requires faith?
Okay, so there's a promo video. You can find it at ordo-militaris.us under the video page. I think it's the second or third video AJ did with PowerPoint and with music. We actually got a license for it. I love that music, it's great. So on one slide it says, faith implies order. Order implies justice. Justice implies a will to action, which is like a little catechetical statement we use in formation for the order. Because the problem today is Catholics, I generally understand they should believe, okay, though they're not all do. And then some people like Nancy Pelosi think she believes and acts as complete Satanist or Marxist or both. Joe Biden has the same thing. That's not faith, okay? So, but from those who understand that you should believe the whole faith and be loyal to it, they confine that fidelity to this part of their body, to the brain, I mean, as if intellectually they should be faithful, but in action they can do anything like. Okay, and it's understandable that in moral things, many people fail from what they know faith should do. But we're going to now talk about how faith is connected to action, because this is the big schism. This is the big spiritual schism in every Christian's life in modern times, every Catholic life. What they believe, they don't put in practice. If Christians only put in practice what they believe, I mean Catholics especially, the world would be a lot better off. So Christ has a huge army, 1.6 billion, but they're not serving. They're not doing their duty. And people say, why do we have all the problems in the world? We have to pray to God. Has God abandoned us? No, you have abandoned God. God has not abandoned you. And you abandon God not only, you can abandon God not only by renouncing him intellectually or volitionally, it means in your will, but also not renouncing him intellectually or in the will, except that you don't put it into practice what you should be doing. That's also renouncing God. So a married couple who get divorced and separated have renounced God in action, because their faith requires them to stay together through thick and thin and to endure whatever varieties of problems they have or differences of character, and to be faithful to one another. And if one should fail in that, that's no excuse the other should fail. So fidelity to God requires that we act, okay? If you're a faithful Catholic parent, you don't send your kid to a crazy, whacked out Catholic private school where he's going to get all messed up intellectually or even emotionally or morally, okay? That would be abandoning God if you do that. So actions have consequences. You can't say I'm faithful to the church and to Christ and go to a church where the priest preaches sodomy is okay, even if he's a Catholic priest recognized by a Catholic bishop. That's heresy, and to go to that church and support it is to abandon God. So this is something that's harder to understand in modern times and always been is a bit difficult to understand in Western Europe. I love the Greek theology, because they call this atheos. If you do anything where God is not involved in the decision, in the sense of you're obeying God or putting to practice his teachings, then your action is atheos, means it's atheistic, okay? It's godless. And when you don't do your duty, you're acting godlessly, okay? And that's why the clergy who don't do their duty have shut down all the churches and deny the sacraments and put masks all over the faces and demand you receive in the hands, because they're totally godless. and they've lost the entire principle of fidelity to God. Now they're just obeying the state, and that's idolatry. That's like godless idolatry. So we need to show how faith is connected to action. So this is the three thing. Faith implies order, order implies justice, and justice implies a will to action. So if you truly believe in God, then your faith leads you to recognize that there is an order in this world. God is at the top. He's the supreme commander, the highest superior. You are, then there comes the saints and angels in heaven. Well, Jesus Christ, the saints, angels in heaven. Jesus Christ as a man, as God, he's already God. Our Lady, the saints in heaven, the holy angels. And then there's this world. And you're not, you have to admit, you're not the greatest in this world. You're not the most important. You're not the brightest, and you're not, okay? You're way, 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 way down on the scale, and you're like a nobody, okay? But worse than a nobody, without God, you'd be nothing. Less than nothing, you'd go to hell. So if you believe, that's where you see yourself. You see yourself right down there at the near bottom, okay? Because you recognize there is a huge order of superiority and authority above you, okay? I'm not talking about the state, okay? The secularist and godless person who makes the state his God, the only order he thinks of is who is president or prime minister of my country. If they say, kill your mother, I'll kill my mother. You know, that's the way people they are. That's the Nazi religion, okay? And Hitler said, when asked in the last days of his public life, what will happen with the Nazi party? Will it ever revive? And he says it will return, but not as a party, but as a religion. Because he knew that if his followers, who all fled Germany, could turn it into a religion, they would control men's minds even more firmly than their political ideology that he tried to use. He tried to use political ideology, but at the end of his life, he realized that creating false religion is the real way of doing it, because he was an admirer of Islam. And Muhammad, on controlling people's minds with false religion, was way ahead of Adolf Hitler in ingenuity, if we could call it ingenuity and not devilry. Mm-hmm. So faith recognizes order. If your faith in Christ, in the Catholic Church, and all of the church teachings doesn't incline you to respect authority, I mean honest, legitimate authority, and to recognize that you don't have it and you can't usurp it, and that you have to obey many things, rules you can never change and no one can change because they're from God or they're from the church, then you have faith. You have real faith, because that's what faith leads you to do. If you have the fake faith of many Protestants, let's say the Calvinists or the Presbyterians, you believe that you have the right to overthrow order, overthrow any authority that you don't like, okay? And never Trumpers of this kind of thing. Democrats are filled with this kind of thing. It's not Catholic at all. And that's why in all traditional manuals of Catholic theology, rebellion and revolution are presumed to be mortal sins. Only under rare cases can you rebel against your legitimate authority, okay? And only in extremely rare cases. And that's when the monarch actually turns to kill his people and destroy them, okay? I'm not speaking of cases when the authority is not legitimate, okay? So if your government starts worshiping, your government declares that everyone should be killed, they're no longer legitimate, even if they came into power legitimately, okay? But faith requires you to obey order. Now, the reason why this is hard to understand today is the whole world is just saturated with Marxist propaganda, which it holds in politics the only real virtue is to overthrow the government, start a revolution. You hear people saying for the most common and benign things, we need to start a revolution. I think, don't you realize a revolution is not something you just start because you want to, you know, raise money for the soup kitchen down the street? You don't use the phrase, let's start a revolution. Or we need to introduce a new kind of technology, so we need to start a revolution. That's not what it means. I mean, that's how saturated the world's with Marxist ideology. We need to eliminate Marxist ideology from our life, our mind, our culture, our families, our homes, because it just distorts your mind. Revolution is nearly always a sin. I'm trying to think of a revolution, perhaps only in the United States, where they rebelled over taxes to a certain extent, okay, to a certain extent, though the American Revolution, because of such a small tax, you could argue that in a certain sense, who wasn't just, but their king was not Catholic, and he was a persecutor of Catholics, so he wasn't a legitimate monarch from that point of view. In fact, the popes had long before deposed the kings of England from their authority for rejecting the Catholic faith. But revolutions are rarely just, okay? The French Revolution was completely unjust, godless, and demonic, and anyone in favor of it then, now, or in the future commits a mortal sin and go to hell. I don't care if you're a saint and you go to your death having worked miracles and you held the French Revolution was just, Christ's going to damn you to hell because overthrowing your legitimate monarch is a mortal sin, okay? Not to mention killing him, okay? And killing all the clergy involved and everything like that, which is why we can never admire totally in every aspect men like Napoleon, because he was in favor of the revolution. And he was not the legitimate ruler of France, okay? So faith requires you recognize order. It's extremely anti-Marxist. The actual authentic Christianity is anti-Marxist and can never be pro-Marxist in any sense of the word. As soon as you imply that the order that exists must be overthrown and destroyed, you're satanic. You're not Christian. You're anti-Christian or anti-Christic. And this idea of overthrowing the Christian order does not come from Christianity. It comes from the enemies of Christianity, Satanists, and those minorities in Europe who weren't Christian who wanted to overthrow the Christian order. And we see this in Islam. We see this in Talmudic Judaism. We see this in certain forms of Protestantism, founded by men who couldn't get a career in the Catholic Church and therefore wanted to destroy what they couldn't use for their own purposes. So that's the first thing. You have to recognize there is an order. Now, why is recognizing order is an important thing? Because once you recognize order, you naturally acquire the virtue of justice, because justice is the recognition of what each person deserves. That is, it maintains order. Matter of fact, if you look at the just war theory common in the Catholic Church since the 1500s, a just war restores order. You can never wage war to destroy order. It's only to restore order. And there's different kinds and levels of order: political, moral, religious. Okay. So once you recognize as an order, then you realize if you truly have faith, you not only recognize order, but you want to defend order, okay? You want to defend lawfulness. You want to defend peace. You want to defend the innocent. You want to defend the just. You want criminals punished. The common concept today that capital punishment should be abolished because it doesn't help criminals, reform criminals, is contrary to justice. It's contrary to order. It's also contrary to the Catholic faith. And that's why Bergoglio tries to undermine that whole ethic by saying that, it's contrary to the faith to support capital punishment. It's only contrary to the Marxist faith or the satanic faith to avoid capital punishment. And the only people who would be opposed to capital punishment, either imbeciles, because they're too simple to understand the problem, psychotics in the sense of they refuse to recognize evil as evil, or they deserve capital punishment because of their crimes. And I think most of the clergy, for all the pedophilia they've either committed personally or pedophiles they defended, know that they deserve to be go to the gallows for it. And therefore, they're opposed to capital punishment because they don't want that punishment to arrive. They want it to be able to say, oh, look at how wicked you are. You want capital punishment. You're so inhumane. That's what they want to say. So they try to emotionally so stain the character of capital punishment that it would never revive. And that's to show that they're involved in a criminal conspiracy and that they're criminals. And the left is all that way, whether they're in the church or out, because they will not recognize order, and therefore they will not recognize justice. So justice always upholds order. And since Marxism and modernism and all heresies attack order, and all false political ideologies like socialism attack order, the faith requires us to oppose all these errors, okay? That's just an obligation of faith, because faith recognizes order, and in recognizing order, it recognizes that order must be upheld, and therefore it has a sense of true justice, because that's what justice is. But finally, if you have a sense of justice, if you have the spirit of justice, and it's actually a virtue, justice is a virtue. The grace of God is actually called justice, okay? Because it justifies the soul. It puts the soul back in right order with God, no longer a sinner, no longer chained to vice, but now liberated and believing in God, hoping in God, and loving God. It breaks the bonds. That's what we talk about, the spiritual liberation. It's returning the person to the right order with Christ, and that means becoming a Catholic and being a good, faithful Catholic. There's no justice in, converting to any other forms of Christianity. If you understood the whole gospel the way it should be. Now, obviously, some people don't understand the whole truth, so they act on the grace of conversion and join some group they think is faithful to Christ. Okay, and so they still might acquire some justice because they're at no fault for their ignorance. Knowing what the true Church of Christ is a rare grace that God concedes, and most people have to labor at it with their study. But if you have a true sense of justice, now you're going to take action because you're going to defend the order of justice. Because if your faith isn't just on your lips, but you actually believe it, then when something like a sacrilege takes place, the statue of Christ outside your parish is decapitated, you just don't sit there and go, ho hum, they decapitated the thing. Isn't that horrible? No, you go out there, you say to the pastor, let me help you clean up the site. Can we repair the statue? You need to raise donations to fix this. Do we need to stand a guard around the parish, like we mentioned in our show, the guards of Casimir, St. Casimir?
I want to
Yeah.
mention what Saint Basil the Great wrote on restoring order and punishing clergy who committed sexual abuse back in his day.
Okay, great. You found a wonderful quote. Let me hear it. I'd love it.
Saint Basil the Great, doctor of the Church, writing in the 4th century, described how the early Catholic Church dealt with those guilty of sexual abuse among the clergy. Any cleric or monk who seduces young men or boys, or who is apprehended in kissing or any other shameful situation, shall be publicly flogged, and shall lose his clerical tonsure. Thus shorn, he shall be disgraced by spitting in his face, bound in iron chains, wasted by 6 months of close confinement, and for 3 days each week put on barley bread given him toward evening. Following this period, he shall spend a further 6 months living in a small segregated courtyard in custody of a spiritual elder, kept busy with manual labor and prayer, subjected to vigils and prayers, forced to walk at all times in the company of 2 spiritual brothers, never again allowed to associate with young men.
Wow. So they were in the 4th century, but they really understood how to discipline people. And I guess he, at that point, the monk would be locked up in a cell. There was things called prison monasteries, and someone who's a predator like that, it's either capital punishment or you have to lock them in a cell for the rest of their life without even an image of the child Jesus, because if they see any baby, they'll just send them off. And if they're truly repentant, they'll accept that. But if they're not repentant, then they should be put to death because they're going to rape someone as soon as they get an opportunity. They're psychopaths. They're totally immoral people. For them, there is no morality when it comes to the fulfillment of their sexual perversion. And here we have a perfect example of how a saint has zeal for justice and upholding order, and therefore imposes a severe punishment on a severe crime. It's an excellent example, and there's nothing medieval about that. That's perfectly, acceptable. You notice how in the modern Masonic state you can't whip anyone anymore. That's just unjust. Yeah. Why? Because physical punishment punishes the body for illicit pleasure. Okay. But the Masons won't admit that there's illicit pleasure because their god is the devil. So they abolished all corporal punishment because they don't want to admit there's any sin that you can commit with your flesh. And that's not the Catholic notion. And Catholics who in politics are opposed to corporal punishment or capital punishment are not Christian activists. Okay. So Christian activism requires that you have a will to act, but not just to do any kind of action. You're not a Christian activist if you want to start selling lemonade in front of your house to raise money for the local Red Cross, which is a secular Masonic organization. That's not Christian activism. Christian activism is selling lemonade in your front yard because you don't have any money yourself and you're a 12-year-old boy, but you want to raise money for the Christians who are starving to death in Lebanon or Nigeria. Okay, that's Christian activism. Why? Because it's directed to upholding order and justice where because people should have food to eat, and if they're starving, then we have a duty out of mercy to help them. And that is the wider sense of justice. So we're not talking about socialism. Christian activism is not saying we need a bill in Parliament to give every unwed mother enough money to have as many children she likes by as many men without having to get married. That's not Christian activism, because it's unjust to support a woman who's fornicating. They don't even see the word fornicate anymore, because that's what these people are doing. In a Christian state, families who are married will always be helped more than women who are not married, even if the woman is exploited. But, you know, unless you're totally unaware about the facts of life, you know how to avoid having a child. It's not letting a man get that close to you, right? And it's not like it happens in 1 second. So you have to consent to it over a period of time. So these women have no excuse. They chose it. They can't say, oh, I'm afflicted with the baby. Okay. But at the same time, if they don't abort, they're not as unjust as those who do. Those who do abort their children, whether married or not, are absolute vile fiends. And the left tries to encourage all women to abort so that souls are consecrated to the devil by an act which they will never repent of, and which will color their entire political outlook on all the votes they take. That's why the Freemasons were big on pushing universal suffrage. Now, I'm not against women voting. Women can be as rational as men most of the time. But there are ways that you can influence women. You could.
Hold on, folks. We are having technical difficulties. Brother Alexis will be back in a moment. Yeah. Yeah, and that woman's suffrage thing, folks. You see some of it in let's see, the Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman TV show. There you go.
Yeah, I guess our censor today is a woman. Okay. I do not intend to offend you, but I'm just explaining Catholic things. And so that's certainly what I'm saying certainly doesn't apply to all women. But, you know, to win an election today, all you need is 5-10%. So if only 5-10% of men or women vote for a candidate because they're of the opposite sex and are attractive, then the election can be influenced. And that's why democracy is such a lousy form of government. Aristotle, who was a pagan, said democracy is the worst form of government and always leads to tyranny, the tyranny of the majority against the minority.
Yeah.
Wonderful quote there from Basil. So we talk about how faith requires you to recognize there is an order in the world of superiors and inferiors, and recognizing that leads you to have a desire to uphold that order because you recognize it comes from God and it's based on truth, and you're not the end all be all of everything, okay? Because you're sane, you're not an egomaniac. And so you want to uphold justice because you know if the order of the world God established is upheld or restored, everyone's going to be better off and everyone will arrive at salvation. And since you have that sense of justice, now you're going to take action and do something about it. So this threefold phrase that you find in that video explains the whole spiritual and philosophical rationale of Ordo Militaris Catholicus. We see that there's terrorism in the world. We see that's unjust. We see that Christians have the right to live peacefully in security because their faith makes them the adopted sons of God. Therefore, they're superior to all their persecutors. And therefore, to restore order, justice requires us to take action and defend them and or liberate them.
So we look at the examples I put in the show page. You got Sobieski leaving in the entire country of Poland and Lithuania empty of troops. Forced march and ride to Vienna without it. He's just like, okay, I'm going to leave you guys defenseless and ride to Vienna.
Now, this is a great example of faith, of justice, and of activism. Okay, faith. He knew that the Ottomans were attacking Vienna, not just to take the city of Vienna, but wipe Christianity out of Europe, and that was opposed to the will of God. He saw that Christians have the right to live in Europe, they have a right to live in peace, and they have a right to oppose and defend themselves against the wicked designs of the Ottoman Empire, which are based on a false religion, a superstition called Islam. So he takes action, but he does it with faith. To take all the troops out of your country and go beyond the borders of your country and defend a city that's not even part of your country, okay, wasn't even a part of any, long-standing alliance. Poland was often at war with Germany and things like that. But he did it for Christ and Christ's kingdom. So since he was serving Christ, he had absolute confidence that Christ would guard his kingdom. And so it happened. And he was crucial in winning a decisive victory against the Ottoman Empire in front of the gates of Vienna in such a way that the Ottomans did not come back. But also because he never got anything out of it. Most kings who mass a huge army and go overseas to conquer something, well, they want some treasure, they want some territory, they want something out of it. They want the hand of some powerful princess's daughter in marriage to get something out of it. He got nothing out of it. He lost men. Poles were killed. He came back with having to tell many a mother, your son is dead, but we have won, we have prevailed. So his victory was only for merit in heaven, okay? And I think even historians have basically censored him out of history because he was such a Christian activist, and what he did was for the cause of Christ. And the Masonic world order does not want you to know about King Jon Sobieski III, because God, the devil, they would say in their secret lodges, the devil forbid that any Catholic know this guy's example, because this is precisely the reaction we do not want out of Christendom, because that reaction is completely free of our propaganda control, our narrative control, our mind control, our economic control, our political control. We couldn't control it. If a rebellion like that took place in the Christian West against the Masonic order, the Masonic order would be destroyed within a month. It would be completely wiped out, and that would be a just war and a just rebellion, because it's evil of the devil and it's out to deceive and destroy souls and totally warp and pervert society. So that's what they fear. That's why they fear Christian activism. And that's why if they hear the show, they'll go absolutely bonkers, because they want the evil disorder, disbelief. They're heretical. Therefore, they do attack order. They want disorder. And therefore, they promote injustice. And therefore, they want Christians not to be active, although they are very active in what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
King Jon Sobieski. And that's what we should do. Be like Jon Sobieski. If there's a problem in your town, that, for example, the Catholic Church is being attacked, you pick up your gun and you go defend it. Don't worry about who's going to defend your family. God will defend your family. You say, St. Michael, I'm going to defend the church. You defend my family. And he will, of course, assuming your house is not near the church. If your house is near the church, then defend your family too. But, you've got to realize that if you're serving the cause of Christ, he'll defend the homeland. He'll defend your house. Within limits, of course, I'm saying, if there's an imminent direct threat on your house, then that's where your duty lies. So he's a wonderful example in Christian activism and great faith in divine providence for those who are serving Christ that way.
Let's talk on a group we haven't touched on yet, the Cristeros.
Yeah, the Cristeros. So I'll speak only briefly about them since I'm not an expert in the Cristeros. So there was a revolution in Mexico in the beginning of the 19th century. I think it began in 1912, 1913. The Masons took over the country, and started suppressing the Catholic Church. They wanted to actually eliminate the Catholic Church. They were arresting all the clergy. They were making it on pain of death that a priest should say mass or hear confessions or celebrate the sacraments. So Western Mexico has always been the strongest part of the Catholic faithful in Mexico in recent generations, let us say. And they just saw, well, the church is being attacked. The faith is being attacked. We cannot tolerate this. They immediately formed a resistance, and they called themselves the Cristeros. And their purpose of their entire movement was to defend the right to be Catholics and to defend the clergy. And they led a rebellion against the Masonic government that the Masonic government was losing. They couldn't win. And they risked their lives. They lived their reputation. Many of them were mercilessly killed. Tens of thousands, their names we'll never know. I think all of them are martyrs. I think they're all in heaven for what they did. That doesn't mean they didn't use guns and kill the enemy, okay? And it doesn't mean sometimes they were very severe on their opponents and executed whole squads of Freemasons, okay? But when the war is spiritual like that, then the means used can be severe. The Masons couldn't win against the Cristeros. The Cristeros would not submit to the Masonic order. They were true and faithful Catholics. They knew that you could never have peace with Masons. Okay, so what did the Masons did? The Masons sent an ambassador to the Vatican and said, we need peace in our country. Peace is the best thing. We'll promise them freedom of religion if they just lay down their arms. Then we can all live happily ever after. I don't know what pope it was in Rome, but he was like naive. You do not negotiate with Masons. The Pope should have replied by sending a letter to Cristeros and said, keep on the war and I'm going to send you guns. That's what a Pope should have said. And that's what every medieval Pope would have said. No medieval Pope would have said to a Christian nation, surrender to an anti-Christian government. No medieval Pope. He would have been, if he said that, he probably had the people of Rome take him out of the Vatican and throw him in the Tiber and drown him, because that would be an act of absolute infamy. But the errors of Freemasonry are already spread, and maybe the Pope feared that the Masonic powers in Europe would take up a war against him. I don't know why he said. So he told the Catholics, he told the bishops to tell the Catholics that under pain of excommunication, they must lay down their arms and sign a peace treaty with the Masonic government, and that their religion would be respected, but they had to surrender their guns. The part of respecting the religion was in part kept by the Mexican government, except that clergy couldn't wear their habit in public, which is an outrage. That's already a violation of it. But they did allow masses and they did allow sacraments from then on. However, no sooner had they laid down their guns that the Masonic troops poured into Western Mexico, arrested the Cristeros, and executed, I think, more than 20 or 30,000 in firing squads, which was contrary to the treaty they signed. And a lot of Catholics who read this story get really upset at the bishops of Mexico, which caused these people lays down their arms, obeying, because they're Catholics, they're obeying their bishops in what they're being done, and they died for that. And that's why I think they're martyrs of obedience. But they were betrayed by their bishops. And this is a very disturbing fact. And I think no one until the lockdown would imagine that your bishops could all betray you like that. But yes, now that you see, even our bishops around the world, they all betrayed us. All of them closed the churches. They all betrayed us in the most vicious and un-Catholic way. Okay, they were not Christian activists. They became satanic activists in what they did. And they don't even have a sense of the sin that they committed. They keep doing it. And they'll even argue and defend what they're doing. Even priests who say the Latin Mass, they're just that bold. So the Cristeros are an excellent example of Christian activism. They did what was right, even to the point of losing everything for it. And their descendants in Western Mexico are still among the most devout and faithful Catholics. If there's any strong Catholics in Mexico, it's in Western Mexico.
It was Pope Pius XI.
Oh, Pope Pius XI. And he wrote the encyclical in Christ the King, so he knows better. But Pope Pius XI was the one who allowed the modernists back into the seminaries. And he's widely criticized because as a disciple of Rampolla di Tindari, the Masonic faction in the church. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised.
In the movie with Andy Garcia and his powerful graphic, when that little boy Sanchez was taken because his uncle tricked him in that awful Freemason Mexican sociopath tortured the little boy. Literally skinned his feet. Made him walk on glass. And then his uncle like, please, give up your religion. He's like, Viva Cristo Rey.
So here's a perfect example. The Masonic West is always telling you we must abolish corporal punishment, but when it comes to Catholics who rebel against them, they have no qualms about imposing the most vicious forms of capital punishment. So remember that the next time you hear about capital punishment should be abolished, it's only going to be abolished for non-Catholics or for Catholics who don't rebel against the Freemasons. If you're a Catholic activist, they want capital punishment for you. And you see this viciousness on social media. We'll do a program on social media trolls and how they really are expressing the entire political dynamic of the Masonic Lodge and how they do their attacks. But God bless all the Cristeros, and may they pray for us from heaven, because we have entered very dark times and stormy seas, and we need the help of their prayers and their wonderful example of activism. Oh, and I'll point out that the bishop has no authority to tell you to lay down your arms. Christ told you that you had the right to bear arms, and so no bishop has the authority to lay them down, not even the vicar of Christ on earth. And if he does, you say, Holy Father, you lay down your arms and see what happens. Okay? Get rid of all your Swiss Guard and see what happens to the Vatican in 6 months, and then I'll decide whether it's of God that I should lay down my arms to defend my family and my people.
Yeah.
Just a little footnote there.
If the Pope was like Archbishop Linga, and you go like, nice letter.
Yeah, a Pope has to have some manliness to him. Otherwise, it's useless that he becomes a vicar of Christ. He's never going to serve Christ well, because he has to be a man of faith who recognizes order and is zealous for his justice and has the confidence in God that his divine providence will be at his back when he is being an activist for Christ's cause.
Yeah. If we had a true Pope back then, and it wasn't Pius XI, we'd be like, come, we're going to the Vatican radio station.
Well, you know, if Pius XI had chosen to support the Cristeros instead and asked the Catholic world to fund them, send them armaments, and fight with them, Mexico would have become a devout Catholic nation and a powerhouse against communism and against Freemasonry in Latin America, and we wouldn't see all the chaos in the New World right now because of that, okay? But it didn't. So that sin of Pius XI, that was a great sin because its effects were so evil. And that's why the popes who called crusades were such great popes. The pope who first called the crusade, Blessed Urban II, he's a blessed of the church. Church recognizes he's in heaven for what he did. And many, many saints, more than dozens of saints, were in the crusades. So activism isn't just, you know, something I'm going to do for my career. As a Christian, you're obliged to be a Christian activist. And if you do so, you merit heaven for yourself and countless blessings for the generations that follow.
Oh, you recognize the Franciscan habit he's wearing? St. Francis was no hippie. He preached for the Crusades.
That's right. That's right. St. Francis went on the Fifth Crusade, and he brought a chaplain along for the men. So, and he was very concerned about the men there, and he was even a good tactician. He could foresee that they were going to lose a battle before they lost it, so he wasn't ignorant about these things. Most people don't forget that St. Francis, before he became a servant of God, he actually organized a brigade of men in his own town to fight against Perugia, and he was the captain of it. And the Battle of Longstreet, which took place in like I think 1203 or 1204, he organized it. His family financed it. He was the head. So it wasn't like he's a pacifist. He was not a pacifist at all. Matter of fact, he got his vocation while he was on horseback, armored, to go fight with the papal army in Apulia against the German emperor, who was trying to encroach upon papal claims in central Italy. So, I mean, why would God give such a man like that the inspiration to do anything unless he was already doing something right? And he didn't. It wasn't like God was rebuking him. You should go fight. Fight for me. Don't fight evil wars. No. Our Lord said, better to serve a higher master. Okay, our Lord didn't say serving the Pope was wrong. He said serving me was better. So yeah, he's not a hippie. He's not an anarchist. He's not he's not smoking pot, and he's not dancing with immigrants.
Yep. Let's see. Let's see. Next coming days, we'll be talking about another Christian activism that needs to be done, because Turkey has thrown their hat in with Azerbaijan to take on the little Christian kingdom of Armenia.
Yeah, Christians around the world have to, if war breaks out there, be activists and come to defense of Armenia, because what Turkey has done in Syria makes it pretty clear that they have ambitions to expand their boundaries permanently. And Armenia is easy pickings if Christendom doesn't come to her defense.
Yeah. So tomorrow, during our special Q&A, we'll be talking about the importance of joining Ordo Militaris, a few other things, bringing up what's going on with Armenia, Azerbaijan, now Turkey. And I think we'll also have another show on it. Just keeping it out there in the news so people don't forget about it. Let's see. What else?
Well, Christian activism is something very important today. I mean, I think everyone sees, with the cities burning in the United States and nations locking everyone up in their house for no reason, that if you're not a Christian activist, you're going to be wiped out, forcibly vaccinated, and have your health ruined or die, your health and those of all your family.
Yeah.
So you've got to be an activist. You will not survive the crisis we are currently in without being an activist, in the sense of a Christian activist, faithful to Christ in everything and resisting entirely this wicked Masonic globalist order that they want. So you have to refuse the mask, you have to refuse the vaccine, and you have to stand your ground. So, well, there's no medical reason for me to wear the mask. Okay. Answer with a rational statement, because that will go right to the heart of the person listening to say, I'm just not going to wear the mask. They'll say, oh, you're just obedient and we'll beat you up. But you say, no, there's no medical reason for me to wear the mask because it's less lethal than a winter flu, and I'm not in a population of people who would die from it. And anyhow, I have a supply of hydroxychloroquine at home, and I take my pills every 2 weeks. It's impossible for me to get the cold. So
yeah,
you respond that kind of thing. And whether you're going in stores or in office buildings or government buildings, I walked right into a government building where you have to wear a mask, and I told the official right there, I'm not going to wear a mask. Why should I need to wear a mask when you're standing 10 feet away from me because you're afraid of a disease that I don't have and you don't have? Or I say to him, well, why do I need to wear a mask if you're wearing a mask? Because if you're wearing a mask, you're protecting yourself from yourself, and you're protecting me from yourself, and so I don't need protection. Why need to have 2 layers of protection if one is sufficient? And if your mask doesn't prevent me from getting infected, and then it doesn't, why are you wearing it? Then if your mask doesn't prevent me from being infected, and if I wore a mask, we both wouldn't either be protected, because if the mask doesn't protect, 2 of them doesn't protect. So you hit them with rationality, truth, and disarm them, because most people know they're involved in a big lie. No one lived this way for tens of thousands of years. So It's a big lie, 10,000 or whatever, however the old the world is. So you got to resist it. Don't let them
Yeah.
vaccinate your children. Don't send your children to schools with a mask, because they're going to be indoctrinated. Their health will be ruined. They'll be psychologically injured for life. And they'll come home one day and say, I told my teacher that you don't wear the mask. And the police will be right behind your little daughter and arrest you and take you to prison, and you'll never see your children again. And your children will sit down at the table and say, we got rid of the infective daddy. That was wonderful, because that's what we're taught in school. And that's what they will be taught in school, because the Marxists will always teach children to betray their parents. They're opposed to order. So you have to be a mindless, brainly idiot to go along with COVID-19, the COVID-19 stunt. You have to be a Christian activist. You have to refuse it. You have to, in those nations where they're doing this in schools, homeschool your children.
Yep.
You have to refuse the mask and the vaccine. And if you can't do that where you are, then sell your house or end your lease and go and flee. You have to. Christ says, if they persecute one land, flee to another. That's why we're promoting the Crusader option, because it's to a point where it's absolutely obvious that Catholics have to flee to the countryside, establish their own fortified communities where they can live in freedom and not be persecuted by these crazy sociopathic politicians who think that everyone is unclean except maybe rich Jewish people.
Yeah. That got it boxed because, well, it's stupid work stuff. And on the side of it, it says, not for use in any surgical setting or where significant exposure to liquid, bodily, or other hazardous fluids may be expected. Not for use in a clinical setting where the infection risk level through inhalation exposure is high. Not for use in presence of high intensity heat source or flammable gas. So it does nothing.
It does nothing, exactly. Even the medical masks in Europe will say explicitly on them, this mask will not prevent you from getting infected. Because what is the purpose of the mask? It is not medical, it's political. By forcing you to wear a mask, you accept the state's dictate to subhumanize yourself, to self-denigrate yourself, and to become submissive to the state, so that when the vaccine comes, you put out your arm and you take it. And then once that vaccine is in you, then you must go through other vaccinations, and whatever Bill Gates wants to put in you, puts in you, your health will be totally destroyed. You might even start growing cancers and all kinds of strange things in your body, and you'll become infectious to others by the things they put in you.
Yeah.
Then you'll become their slave, and you won't be able to do anything. And they can wipe out vast sections of the population that disagree with them. And don't imagine for a moment that Catholics won't get a different kind of vaccine that's more lethal. Don't imagine for a moment that that's not the case.
Yeah.
So that's why they want you to wear the mask. It's psychologically inducive. That's why they want students in schools to wear it. Or as they're doing now in Italy, the students will have to wear it in the hallways, but the teachers have to wear it all day. That's to teach the children that the mask must be worn. It's to spread the paranoia and the mind control. This is all. What we're seeing here is the revival of the Third Reich. It's the Fourth Reich. It's Nazism returned as a religion, and it's politically slightly different, but it's still designed to destroy everyone, okay? Because Nazism is an ideology that says it's going to help you, but it really destroys you, because it's left-wing socialist. It's satanic and diabolic. So you have to be an activist today. So don't take the program we said today lightly. This is not, you know, something you can add to your resume. This is something you either going to add to your resume, or someone's going to add a death certificate to your resume. There's no other possibilities. So don't buy into the Kool-Aid of the television. Stop watching the television. It's full of propaganda. It's designed solely to control your emotions, and therefore to control your will and your mind. You have to realize who the enemy is, that Christ is your ally. You have to be faithful, and you have to take decisive actions to protect yourself and your family. And you have to do it now. You can't plan to do it next winter. There may not be a chance, right, next winter.
Yeah.
The government at any moment could stop the sale of guns, because they know when the revolution comes, you can't be armed. So now they're trying to convince you psychologically. But once that fails, they'll start confiscating guns, because then they will try to actually forcibly. As I said before, Trump said he's going to use the military to distribute the vaccine. Do not imagine that those are peaceful words. No one says in their right mind They need a military to distribute a vaccine. The vaccine could be distributed to you by mailing it to you in your post office box, right?
Yeah.
And it could have instructions on how to inject yourself. Why does the military have to come by? Because they're going to force you under pain of death. That's why. Come on, common sense now. So you have to realize that we no longer have, in most Western nations, we no longer have a government. We have the global elite who have turned against the people of their nations. They had legitimate authority. Now they have no legitimate authority. They're a criminal organization. They are revolutionaries. They're out to destroy humanity as we know it. And everyone has the right to take up arms and to take any decisive action against them. But you can never organize in social media. Social media was created so they know everything you're thinking and doing, okay? For example, I clean my browser out every day. I have a special program that cleans it out. If I'm on the internet for 1 hour, 1,000 applets will download into my browser to watch what I'm doing. If I'm on all day, there might be 8,000 of them. I clean them out every day. So everything you do on the internet is being recorded. All your words are being recorded. All your choices are being recorded. So they know exactly what you're doing. You have to be an idiot if you're going to organize a resistance against globalists on the internet. You're an idiot because they'll know what you're doing. You've got to turn off your Wi-Fi router. You got to unplug your phones. You got to take the chips out of your cell phones and the batteries out of your cell phones. And you need to talk to people where the government cannot know about it. Okay, and that's the only way, because they can, if you turn off your cell phone, they can still listen to you and take photos because they can bypass all the controls. Only if you take the battery out and the chip out can they not do something with your cell phone. You'd be better off really to throw your cell phone away, because this is the deep state's Big Brother tool, okay? And the same thing with any computer you have, any widescreen TV that has a camera on it, anything, okay, like that. The only safe things you can use is like the mechanical wristwatch. They can't bug you, but almost anything else, but even electric watch might have something in it that the government had the manufacturer put in years ago to watch where you are and trace where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they want you to use a credit card, so they can watch what you're doing. You have to go completely to cash. And I would advise Catholics to take all their money out of the bank in cash. Get a strong box or a safe in your house and put it there, and get a lock case and buy firearms to defend you and your family, and learn how to fire them and legally so. So that's where we're at. Don't believe these people are benign. No one would destroy the economy of the entire world if their plot was not extremely malign and their intention to carry it through was extremist in the most grave sense, because they're wealthy people. Why would they destroy the economy of the world unless they are trying to achieve something even more evil, which they desperately seek, and that is extermination of billions of people.
That was a good topic. Now tomorrow is going to be a little bit different. Might be a little bit slow on YouTube. We'll be having a special live Q&A on YouTube, about 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Time, 6 to 8 Rome time, and you'll be able to watch it on the Order Militaris Radio website. You can watch it on YouTube. Ask questions. Please ask questions.
Yeah, so for those 2 hours, you'll be able to talk to AJ and I. We'll be on live. You'll see us face to face, and any question you want to ask us about Order Militaris, becoming a member and being active. And I will talk about the Crusader option. I think a lot of people find that interested, and it'll be one of our topics we can talk about. So we'll kind of do it like live talk radio, where we just chit chat the whole time, and as questions come in, we respond to them. And but the flow of the topics you decide by your questions you answer.
Yep. And if you like all of our programs that we have done, if you see the programs we are scheduling to do next week and in a few weeks, please support us at Order Militaris Radio TV. That is ORDO-MILITARIS.net. Click any of the show topics, blog posts, Scroll all the way down where you see make a free will monthly subscription. Click the blue-green button and follow the steps on whichever one you choose, one time or monthly. That'll help us get everything going, paid off, become even more independent. And you can also see on the menu bar Ordo Militaris Radio Store. That is our Teespring store. You can get the mug I've been using yesterday. You can get the sticker. You can, if you have a smartphone, iPhone or Samsung, you can get the covers for that. You can get t-shirt, hoodie. I think that's about it. I think the t-shirt, hoodie, and covers are also available in the EU, so you can do that too, which is kind of interesting. The mugs were not available to be shipped to the EU, so that is kind of strange. And then you can get the flag behind Brother Alexis.
Yeah, so if you want to help Ordo Militaris Radio TV, you can get one of these large Lepanto flags. You can get it from ordo-militaris.us, the shop tab, the flag link, and half the proceeds will go to Ordo Militaris Radio. And here at Ordo Militaris Radio, we need some monthly pledgers, those who make a pledge every month. We have one great Catholic who's giving $20 a month. Once we get to $40 a month, we'll be able to afford the software so that we can do live video right to YouTube all the time. Right now, we don't have that ability. It costs us money, and we're borrowing the services of others. So if we get some monthly pledgers, we'll be able to do that because that will turn Ordo Militaris Radio TV. We can't currently do live radio because all the live radio companies won't work with us. They're controlled by big interests that don't want Catholics to have free speech. So we can broadcast our radio on our site, but only if you have a tablet or computer can you hear it. It breaks down on cell phones, for example. You won't be able to, but we can't do live radio on the site yet until we figure out the technology and have more equipment. So we need that pledge. We need those monthly pledges so that we can make the next step, because we can do a lot more programming when we have software we can broadcast live with, because then we don't have to worry about editing, pre-editing, all that kind of stuff. We can just put it up there. And most organizations don't do a lot of live programming because they're afraid they'll say something that offends anyone, but we're Catholic and we know that what we say is going to please God, and that's all that matters. So if you like that kind of organization, TV, radio, please pledge monthly to Ordo Militaris Radio TV.
Yep. This is Ordo Militaris Radio TV signing off. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.